Hello, this is Dr. Harold Wong. Today, I'm going to cover the contents of an article that was published July 18th, 2012 in the Arizona Republic. It compares the differences between the greatest generation, I call the grandparents, the baby boomers, and Generation X, which are the grandkids. I see a lot of grandparents that come into my office, and their values are so different from their baby boomers or even their grandkids. They're very puzzled because it brings up the issue, what do they do with their life savings? Who does it go to? Will it have a positive or will it have a negative effect on their heirs, which are the kids and the grandkids? So what we're going to do is, in detail, we're going to cover the three different generations. The greatest generation, named by Tom Brokaw, who wrote a book by that title, were born between 1910 and 1925. They fought for what they believed in, for what was right instead of selfish reasons. They fought against Hitler, Mussolini, Japanese kamikaze bombers, and they survived at a terrible price. Over 1/3 died during World War II, 50,000 died in Korea, and over 500,000 were wounded. But they fought for what was right, and we thank them for all they did. Now, how did they look at a job? Their attitude was, you work for a company, ideally a big company, your whole life, you retire, you get a pension, you add Social Security to that, and that's enough to cover your living expenses. They believed that money, you gotta live within your means. In other words, you gotta spend less than what's coming in. Money meant survival and a livelihood. And again, they were severely impacted in terms of their attitudes by the Great Depression and World War II. They remember what food rationing stamps were during World War II, victory gardens. The younger people don't realize that 60 years ago, 80 years ago, it was very common. What you would do is you would have your bacon, if you're lucky enough to afford to have bacon. Of course, there'd be a lot of grease. You would put it in a can, put it in a window, let it cool off, and it was actually collected for the war effort. A component of bacon grease actually went into bombs. So that's the greatest generation. We thank them for all their sacrifices in keeping the world and America free. Now, baby boomers were the kids of the greatest generation, born after the war, so basically born toward the end of 1945 or 46, and in an 18-year period through 64, what happened? There were about 78 million baby boomers born. Now their attitude was very different. They grew up in a time of peacetime, except for the Vietnam War. Now, what was their attitude toward money? Very different than their parents. Sociologists call baby boomers the me generation, the now generation, the selfish generation. Their attitude is, we're going to spend it. And if we don't have it, we got credit cards, so we'll put it on a credit card. And if we can't afford to pay the credit cards, we'll declare bankruptcy and get rid of the credit card debt. Yeah, a very different attitude than their parents. Their attitude toward work was, well, I need a job to cover my high lifestyle because I want to spend. So when I lose my job, I'll go find another company and I'll work for them. Retirement, well, that's going to be a pipe dream for millions and tens of millions of baby boomers. There's a recent survey, and it looked at the savings patterns of middle-income families where the combined income was $40,000 to $100,000 a year. Shockingly, of those in their 50s, the average they had saved was only $29,000. So really, the only salvation, the only hope for a decent retirement for millions or over 10 million baby boomers is going to be inherit what the greatest generation leaves them. Now, let's go on to the grandkids. Generation X. Well, this is very different. These were latchkey kids because both baby boomer parents worked. And so they would come home after school with a key and amuse themselves. Well, they grew up when computers were common. So they played video games, they watched TV, they hung out with their friends, and really there's no adult supervision until both parents came home from work. Now, their attitudes toward money are different. They realize that they watched their baby boomer parents get divorced, sometimes multiple times. They noticed that the baby boomer parents would lavish them with money instead of time. That's some kind of here's how I become a hero to my kids. I give them stuff, but I don't give them my time because both parents are working and we're tired when we come home from work. So their attitudes are very different. This is the first generation that does not expect to do better financially than the previous generation. For many of the Generation X, particularly suffering through the Great Recession that was set off with the 2008 stock market crash, where we have massive unemployment and underemployment. In some states, it's over 20% when you count the unemployed, the underemployed that are working part-time but want full-time work, and the discouraged workers that were so discouraged after a year of looking for a job and not finding anything, they just left the workforce totally. Can you imagine? Over 20% in certain states. This approaches depression levels because during the Great Depression we had 25% unemployment. So for many in Generation X, their work is composed of working freelance for 2 or 3 different companies, part-time assignments with no benefits, no health insurance. Their attitude to money is they know they have to save, and they'll work until they've saved enough to be able to retire. And even then, they want life experience. For many in Generation X, their hobbies or their friends are more important. They don't have that same attitude of their grandparents, where you work for a big company, you do what they say, you keep your nose clean, you don't make waves, and you stay there for 30, 40 years, you retire, you get your gold watch, your retirement party, and the pension. Well, guess what? Old-fashioned pensions, which means you get a certain amount of income based on how many years you worked at the company, are a thing of the past. Unless you work for a government unit, baby boomers and Generation X are not going to have any pension at all. So what's the solution so that they can have a decent retirement? Well, for many of them, it all comes down to the greatest generation. It all comes down to the fact that the greatest generation did save. Many of the people that come into my office have saved $300,000, $600,000, $1 million, even $2 million. That's not going to be enough if they've got 2 kids and they got 4 grandkids, because now it's divided 6 different ways if everyone got an equal share. So even if someone has saved $1.2 million, divided 6 ways, it's only $200,000 each. But if you can use the multi-generation IRA concept and you add the Roth component, now we can multiply income 2 to 5-fold for our kids and 5 to 10-fold for our grandkids. So now if that Generation X grandparents had saved, let's say, $1 million, and if they can multiply it 5-fold and it becomes $5 million of tax-free income over the life of their 2 kids and their 4 grandkids, well, now that's enough to make a significant difference. Using these concepts and looking at a number of case studies, we've found that it's enough to generate $20,000 to $30,000 of annual income when the kids and the grandkids get to retirement age. You combine that with their Social Security, and now maybe they've got $45,000 to $60,000 a year of steady income, and this is how they're going to be able to have a decent lifestyle. And again, our thanks to the greatest generation. The grandparents, they're still puzzled at the attitudes of their kids, the baby boomers, and their grandkids, Generation X. For more discussion about these topics and the difference in the generations and attitudes toward money and investments and retirement, go to my blog site, drwonginvestorguide.com.